Welcome, Rick Rats, to Season 1, Episode 2 of the-rink.com's Kraken Hostile Rinkcast, live from the COVID-19 studios in the quarantine bubble, brought to you by puckhockey.com. That's PUCKHCKY.com. We'll talk more about that later. Today is Thursday, January 7th, 2021, and I'm your host, Jeff Osborn, a.k.a. Gatekeeper, and Puck and Hostile on Twitter.
Y'all need to take a hit of this Jeffrey. It'll calm you down.
And before we get to the guests, before we get to who I have on the line, I want to talk about our new sponsor. Hockey's back for the 2021 season, and you know what that means. It's time to take care of your family jewels and overall hygiene with the global leaders in the below-the-waist grooming, Manscaped, manscaped.com. That's manscaped.com. They have lots of great items over there, and take that. I am the Marty Brodeur of quaffing. So you can head over there. You can use the discount code The Rink Seattle, just like it sounds, all together, no dashes, no underscores. The Rink Seattle. You get 20% off of your orders, and you get free shipping on this stuff. And this is good stuff. We could BS you through, items that we've never used before or we're not fans of. This is not that case. I mean, with Puck Hockey, we're fans of them. We were before we started these podcasts, and Manscaped the same way. I mean, there's a lot of men here over at the rink that need to be trimmed up a little bit, as they say. So
I wake up in the middle of the night, dry heaving at the amount of bush in this room.
So yeah, they got some great items. They got like the Lawnmower 3.0. It's their new thing. It's their new clippers that they have with the ceramic blade on it, so you don't get cut, whatever, any mishaps with the down belows. They have like deodorant sprays with the crop preserver and the crop reviver, and so there's like a moisturizing cream and a deodorant that goes along with that as well. They have underwear, t-shirts, things like that as well. And then they got like these kits, these really nice leather kits where you can take your stuff on the road with you and stuff like that. So head over to Manscaped, get 20% off by using the discount code The Rink Seattle, and all the other podcasts too. You could do The Rink Chicago or The Rink Colorado, but I would prefer if you use The Rink Seattle. And go over there, check it out. Throw something in your cart, get some of the Lawnmower 3.0. If you've already got that, you could always get, the crop preserver or the crop reviver, any of that stuff, and throw it in your cart, get 20% off, get free shipping, and you support all of our shows at the Rink. So by doing that, it just helps us out with things around here. There's hosting fees and all kinds of other stuff like that. So it really helps if you could go over there. On top of supporting through Manscaped, if you go over and you could rate and review the podcast, that would help as well. We'll talk a little more about that later. But now with all that stuff aside, first of all, I'm joined by at Hockey Knapsack on Twitter, which is Ray Napientek. He's a prospect writer. He writes about the Chicago Steel on our website, and he works over at FC Hockey as well. He writes about the Blackhawks on our website, but he's very knowledgeable about the whole NHL. So I thought it would be a good idea to bring him on. And the guest of the day, we're finally getting to him, is our boy Hart from Puckpedia.com. Now, if you're not familiar with Puckpedia.com, it is the all-encompassing salary cap website with a lot of cool features there. It's Puckpedia.com, nice and easy to get there. But if you head there, you want to look up your team's cap issues. Now, in conjunction with that, if you go to our website, the-rink.com, and you look at the each team's articles and stuff, I have embedded Hart's. He was nice enough to give us stuff that we can embed on our website, and we can embed salary cap lists and things like that on our website. So you can actually, support them by coming to our site as well, and using those devices or using those areas on our website and for salary caps and things like that. So Hart, welcome back. I should say you were on the Chicago one, but now you're on the Seattle one. Welcome back.
Thanks. Great to be back.
Good, man. So it's been a while. I think we had you on. It could have been a year and a half ago or something like that. And there's been a lot of new stuff going on, but just give us your spiel on Puckpedia and let us know and let the fans know more importantly, what, what your intentions are and some of the cool features and give it the whole commercial.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah. So Puckpedia is the ultimate source for hockey fans and professionals. So basically everything you need to know about hockey should be able to find on the site. So all the salary cap information for each team, seeing their cap picture on each player, you can see all their current contract, historical contracts, both basic and advanced stats, all in one place. And then Puckpedia is home of the exclusive agent leaderboard, where you can actually see all the agents ranked by all the contracts that they have in terms of dollars or cap hit or number of contracts. And then each agent has their own page where you can see their whole client list and who they represent. And we actually just updated that now. There's a little summary section on each agent page. You can see the contract summarized by team and by position. So when there's a dispute between your favorite team and an agent, you can quickly see, oh crap, who else does that agent represent on my team? There's also the player dashboard, which is where you can filter and sort and see whatever criteria you want, like for upcoming free agents or scoring leaders, or, who's the highest paid defenseman that doesn't score at all kind of thing. You can find that all there. And I think also the My Puckpedia GM mode is pretty cool. That basically gives you a chance to have your own salary cap site where you can make whatever trades and transactions that you want and see how it impacts your team or all the teams at the same time. It's basically like your own personal sandbox or version of the site. So make sure everyone checks that out as well.
Yeah. And I'm not going to mention any other sites because we only support puckpedia.com, but you may be familiar with some of the things at other places, but I would say that I really enjoy playing with the GM mode over at Puckpedia. It's really cool. And it was really cool that I could go in there and I could create my own salary cap lists, now, aside from the GM mode, but my own salary cap lists for each team. And now they update dynamically, just like, whenever something happens. So, you guys got a lot of really good features down there. I think I like that it's a little more advanced looking. It's prettier to the eyes, the nice logo and all that stuff. So I really like, all the stuff you got going on over there. And I didn't mean to gloss over with Ray, but Ray was mentioning something that he was looking at something having to do with your agent leaderboard thing. Was that Ray?
Yeah, it's neat to go through all the agents. I mean, like you said, that's something that really doesn't get talked about a lot, but that makes a big difference when you're talking about general managers and agents. And the one thing I like too is a lot of the stats that it's just simple. It's all right on one page, even just beyond goals and points. I mean, you got analytical stats, galore as well, and it's all right there. So. But yeah, it's neat to go through and see all the different agents and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. And I also, it was, Hart was nice enough. I reached out, I think early on when they first opened up, and I kind of offered him some, roster information on the Blackhawks, because if you don't cover the Blackhawks day in and day out, there's a lot of things that can get left behind. Players that are no longer in the system that you didn't know about because it was some, minor blurb 6 months ago or something like that. That was, during the summer or something like that. So, he was also nice enough to put us on there as like some of the voices to listen to, to read about and for Twitter and stuff like that. So we appreciate all you've done for us there. So the least we can do is, share your information through our website. So it makes it easy for us, because I manually had to do kind of like the salary cap stuff before. And it was annoying and pain, on top of everything else, and a big pain. So it's nice that I could just drop your embedded stuff into there, and it's nice and easy.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So you're talking about the player dashboard. So anyone can go on there and set whatever criteria you want. And then just there's a button to copy the embed code, and you can put that on your site. So, I know on your Blackhawks site, you just basically filter for Blackhawks players and it all pops up there. And like the goal for the site was really, as a fan before, I would just always be flipping between all these different sites for information. And I just wanted it all in one place. So that's the goal. And so, yeah, even if you're on the Blackhawks site and then you want to read more about them, we actually do have the latest article from the Rink Blackhawks shows up there. And you can click on it and read some latest information as well, on top of seeing all the players and injury news and stuff. So yeah, thanks for all the kind words.
Of course. And of course, when the Kraken actually have a team with some players on it, we can then be a voice for the Kraken as well. So we're looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to that, since I know Ray's been giving me a lot of gruff about it, but moved over to the Kraken beat, which is where, it's a little more peaceful over here. So
I should say, yeah, we updated any player page now. If you go to the players page, right in the header where it says their age and their position, there's a little field that says expansion draft status, and it'll say eligible or not eligible. Obviously, some of that is just projecting a bit, because we're kind of guessing who's going to have the 3 seasons under their belt. But I mean, for the most part, we kind of know. So that's a good way too for Kraken fans to see who might, if you're wondering if a player is eligible, if they played enough in the NHL, you can just go to their page and there's a little field that says expansion draft status, eligible or not eligible.
awesome. That's another great feature for sure. I'm going to have to look once we get closer to the expansion draft to see if I can use that creatively somewhere on our website. But I'm gonna try. I'm gonna look into it for sure, because anything we can do to bring more information to fans and make it easier for them, the better, for sure. So, well, this just recently, this week, I put out kind of one of our first news articles as far as the Kraken goes. Jason Botterill and a name that I'm familiar with from Chicago, Norm Maciver, were named as director of player development and the assistant GM. Botterill's the assistant GM and McIver is the director of player development with the Kraken. It's not like some kind of crazy, move, but it is interesting because to me, looking at that team, it seemed like they were making all these great, these really progressive moves, hiring Francis is the GM, like that seemed to be kind of a progressive move, and they haven't hired a coach yet, but I kind of expect them to go in a progressive direction for that. And then embracing, all forms of, hiring a lot of females for the, for their back office, and being open and hiring, the first African-American announcer in the NHL, all that stuff, like it's really progressive. That's what I really like about this team and this organization, is they seem to be, that team of the 2020s, not the team of the 1970s or 60s. So that's kind of why I really wanted to move over this team. So this kind of really, I looked at it and I was like, well, Jason Botterill, I mean, he won some cups with the Pittsburgh, but when he was put in charge, he didn't do well in Buffalo. He was the general manager in Buffalo, and he only lasted like 2 years. And Norm Maciver, is a guy that I've talked a lot about with John Jekyll from the Chicago division, that he seemed like a guy who had a job but wasn't really going anywhere. And that's pretty much why he left. And now he was kind of like dead weight in Chicago, and now they've picked him up too. So these are two, to me, questionable hires. Ray, what did you think?
It was interesting to see, like you said. I think Seattle was, like you said, it's 2021. It wasn't just kind of a rehash of the same people over and over, but they do bring, hockey experience, the hockey eyes that I think, Francis can have somebody to lean on, somebody that has seen a lot of these players at the NHL level, and not just taking a look at guys, around the world. So for me, I think it's not a surprise. I mean, where Seattle was kind of moving towards, like you said, Gate, a little bit of a surprise, but it's two good hockey eyes, a set of eyes for Francis to have somebody to maybe bounce some ideas off. Thought McIver, I really thought he might have been somebody that Chicago was eyeballing, but looks like with that, quote unquote demotion, the writing was on the wall, and when you're in the sports business, you always get out before it crashes, and so it's a good opportunity for him, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I also heard somewhere that he was very unhappy about being demoted because he was demoted when McDonough was gone or fired, and they were kind of icing him out anyway. So, did you,
Right.
Hart? Did you have any insight, or did you read about this, or?
Yeah, I read about it. I think, well, in the case of like McIver, for example, it's always hard to know what a person's contribution is to the group, right? Because we only see the kind of final decision of transactions that they make or draft picks or whatever they do. You don't know if he was like someone on the team was the person that was advocating for it or was completely against it, but was kind of overruled, right? So you don't really know how someone sort of fit into the finished product. And then with Botterill and Buffalo too. That's the thing that I don't think is covered enough about GMs is like how much direction or input the ownership has, or the business side of the organization has. And, I think there's some decisions made in Buffalo and other teams that are maybe driven by some directives. And you just don't know, again, how much of that Botterill was on board with, how much did he like argue against, but it was overruled. It is really hard, and it's not like watching on the ice. You can see what a person did. All the front office stuff it's really like a team effort with a lot of factors, so it's really hard to evaluate it on one specific person. But people, I guess, are their resume, and you do have to be able to either answer or explain what you learned from your past experiences, or if there wasn't a lot of success. So assuming with that dynamic team that they do have in Seattle, that they had some good answers or explanations about how their past experiences will help them going forward.
Yeah, I'm not going to put too much into this because it is some front office stuff and, just director of player personnel. You're not going to really see a whole lot of what's going to go on until probably the second or third year anyway. And, assistant GM, that job is what it is. You're kind of the gopher. You get kind of some of the secondary jobs of the GM. So, it's not the end of the world, but I just did find it interesting that a Chicago name or a former Chicago name was in there. So that said, the season's about to start. They are going to be starting I believe the 13th next week. So that's going to be interesting. It's going to be a compressed schedule. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on. So with that, I wanted to ask you, there's, when you change the season like this, like there were unintended consequences of things that happened in the bubble and stuff like that because of the way they ran it. And as far as the league finances go, they're kind of a mess right now because of, there's no gate revenue. They're only getting basically money from TV contracts and, several multiple financial issues. But what have you found out, or have you found out anything with this upcoming season that we didn't account for, or something that you see ahead of, some of us who don't follow the financial side of the game that's going to be coming up for this season? What do you think?
Well, I think the part that's the most obvious to me is just like with the taxi squad rules and how that's going to impact everyone. I think we're going to see teams carry a lot less than 23 players. Normally a team would, you dress 20 players, but a team carries 22, 23, because when you're traveling around and your AHL team is far away, you don't want to risk someone gets hurt right before the game, not having someone there. But with the taxi squad, who are not officially on the 23 player NHL roster, but they're physically there with you, there's no really need to carry extra guys other than what you need the 20 for the game, unless you're worried about someone getting claimed by waivers, because to send someone to the taxi squad, it's the same as if you're sending them to the minors. If they need waivers to go to the minors, they need waivers to go to the taxi squad. But so taking that into account, I just think we'll see a lot less than 23 players on each roster. So for the season starting, I think that's going to mean we're going to see a lot of players on waivers like the day or two before the season starts, even more so than usual. I think if there was ever a time to get someone through waivers, it's on the right then. And sorry, I was just going to say, so I think there, for a team that maybe has some cap space or, isn't completely locked into the roster, there may be some good players available to grab on waivers that day before the season. because teams are trying to sneak them through to their taxi squad right off the start, and save the cap space by not carrying them. I think that there's going to be, all positions, but even goalies, like, I think in general, you expect that there'll be a third goalie on the taxi squad, but for teams that have a good third goalie, maybe they don't want to risk them going through waivers, or if they do, maybe a team that's not happy with their backup might grab them. So I think that that maneuvering around the roster size will be really interesting.
That is a very interesting point that you brought up, was that they have to go through waivers if they're waiver eligible.
Mm-hmm.
They have to go through waivers to go back and forth from the taxi squad. That I did not know. So that's very interesting, because that is going to factor into a lot of that, where they think that, a lot of people are assuming that the taxi squad is basically just an expansion of, that expanded roster you can carry around with you when you travel. And, that was the assumption a lot of people had. Not that you actually formally have to put them onto a taxi squad or formally pull them off of a taxi squad to be on the active roster. So that's going to be an interesting thing to see for sure, because, and I hate to be the one who keeps bringing up Chicago, but that's that's what I'm most familiar with, at least until Seattle gets, some players on the roster. But the way Chicago has it is they have 3 goalies who are real close together. None of them really stand out more than one more than the other. And then they have a 4th goalie in line who's basically just maybe a tweener AHL guy. But it makes you wonder if they want to keep 2 guys in the NHL, take that third guy that doesn't make the roster, throw him in the AHL so that he gets playing time and develops, and then take that guy who's like a career AHLer, throw him on the taxi squad as an emergency guy. If you ever, have something where you need an emergency, backup goalie for a night because you have an injury or an illness with COVID or something like that. It'll be interesting to see, because I think Kevin Lankinen on the Blackhawks is the only one that's doesn't have to go through waivers. And Matt Tompkins is the other goalie that I'm talking about. And he has never played the NHL. So I believe I believe he's waiver eligible or waiver exempt too. So.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is, so once so the taxi squad is just like being in the minors. It's almost like it's a separate minor league team. So it's treated just like that. So the normal waiver rules too, once you clear, if you need waivers and then you clear it, you can be in the NHL. You don't need to go through waivers again until you've played 10 games and been on the roster for 30 or more days. And those numbers are not prorated or anything for the special season. So I think we'll also see players clear waivers to start the season, and then the teams might play some games with like not letting them get to 10 games, keeping them back in the minors like on off days. So basically getting them to clear guys that are kind of borderline and are maybe a risk of getting claimed, sneaking them through to start the year, and then trying their hardest not to trigger having to put them back through waivers and sort of keep them not needing waivers again, but spending a lot of the time on the taxi squad. I think we'll see some interesting things like that. In terms of goalies too, the one thing I'm interested in is, like, if you think about it now, every NHL team has to have their 2 goalies plus a third goalie either on the roster or the taxi squad. So what's the AHL going to be like? I think you're obviously going to see some goalies in the AHL that wouldn't normally be playing games in the AHL. So what's the scoring going to be like in the AHL? I think that'll be kind of interesting to see.
Well, yeah, and we found out this week that a handful of teams in the AHL aren't going to be able to play this year. So you're going to have some players moving around as well because they don't have anywhere to play, because Milwaukee and I think 1 or 2 other teams aren't going to play this year.
Yeah, and then with those funny schedule too, like the Canadian AHL teams, I think there's 4 of them, so they're only playing 3 teams. If let's say 2 of them are just happen to be bad, and the other teams put up huge numbers against them, like it'll make like evaluating AHL stats and performance this year really, really hard, because
That's a good point.
It's not a level quality of competition. It's not a level of situation. I think you'll have also decent players on the taxi squad. They don't want to risk sending down to the AHL and dealing with traveling and quarantining and stuff. So it'll be really interesting to see if there's something like crazy wild numbers in the AHL because of the competition.
Yeah.
Come in, Ray.
Ray, what are your some of your concerns and the things you were thinking about as far as the season starting next week and what's going to happen.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, the taxi squad is obviously something that, boy, it could, like you said, Hart, it could be interesting first couple days. When it comes to guys, we have to go through waivers and who could be picked up and getting guys back from, quote unquote AHL team, even though they may not be playing yet. And my understanding is you have to have a goalie on the taxi squad. Is that correct?
Well, you need 3 between the NHL and the taxis. So you could go 2 on the NHL, 1 on the taxi, or if you don't want to lose a guy on waivers, you could go 3 on your NHL and none on the taxi.
So, yeah, I mean, there could be a lot of movement there then, couldn't there? If I'm somebody like Chicago that has 3 and somebody gets banged up and I'm looking for a goalie that could be on the ice and I don't like my AHL guy or I want to, get some depth. I think there could be a lot of movement. Do you see anything possible with trades instead of, possibly losing guys and trading guys to other teams and trying to get some draft picks back if I feel I'm going to lose a guy through waivers?
I think that there's going to be like an insane batch of players on waivers the day before the season and the couple days before. I think if ever teams wanted to just risk it and see if they could sneak a guy through, it's going to be in that initial big batch. And also they'll probably be counting on teams, scared about claiming a guy that has to then travel and be quarantined for 2 weeks or whatever. So I don't like, normally you might see instead of losing a guy on waivers, they might work out a trade. I think there's less desire to do that because they feel they can kind of roll the dice and get away with it. I think the other thing, like leading right up to the start of the year, which is interesting, is we've got almost a third of the league potentially that's going to be using LTIR. And as we've seen before, I don't want to get too much to the detail unless you guys are interested, but to set your LTIR pool, which is how much you're allowed to exceed the salary cap, it's all based on that roster you submit on opening day. You either need to be just under the cap or over the cap by as much as your injured player. And so there's going to be teams that are making moves, not just to like have their best opening roster, but in order to either get right under the cap, like to the dollar, or get over the cap by a certain amount. So I think we'll see also maybe transactions, waiver claims, maybe even potentially trades just to try to work those numbers. And the one thing that just kind of doing some daydreaming and thinking about it. So teams that are going to be over the cap, and so they need to start the year with a player on LTIR. Again, the way to maximize that pool is to be over the cap by as much as that injured player's cap hit. But if you just you're limited by having 23 healthy players on your active roster. If you just can't get enough cap hit to do that, and you're kind of like stuck, you're over the cap but not over by enough. Like, what would a team do? Well, if you claim a player on waivers or trade for a player and they need to quarantine because of that, they count towards your salary cap, but they don't count towards a 23 player roster. So I wonder if like a team, with like their best 23 players, they're, let's say $1 million under being as much over the cap as they want to be, if you can follow that. Do they make a waiver claim for someone they don't really want that needs to quarantine just so they can have them on their cap hit and set that LTIR pool? Like I'm just interested to see if there'll be some transactions like that with teams really trying to, figure out some tricks and maneuver to set these numbers and make the puzzle pieces come together.
Yeah, this is going to be a completely unique year, but you'll have someone like Lou Lamoriello or something that has always kind of pushed the boundaries, like with his contract with Kovalchuk and stuff, that he's always kind of found those little tricks and those little holes in contracts and stuff, in contracts and in the rules, the CBA and stuff like that. So it'll be kind of interesting to see what happens. I think in New York, they're still waiting on Matt Barzal, aren't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think they have to make another move in order to make it work. I think the other thing just that's unique about this season is, so the season is less days, right? So the way the salary cap works is for every day a player is on the roster, the cap hit is divided by the number of days, and that's what gets charged to the team for that day that he's on the roster. So normally it's about 186 days. So, if you do the math, if guy's $1 million cap hit, every day he's on the roster, it's 1 out of 186. Well, this year with the shorter season, it's 116 days. So quite a bit shorter season. That means that every day is like worth more, like they live every day to its fullest, but like these days are fuller in this season than a normal year. So what that means is like however many days a guy is on your roster has a bigger impact than it normally would. And so teams that have salary cap space that are under the cap, they can accrue space, which means if you don't use cap space today, you can use it tomorrow if you're under the cap. And the way that can accrue and build up will be even bigger than in a normal year. So a team that, let's say they're kind of $1 million under the cap for most of the year, that's going to equate to like a much bigger players annual cap it that they can add at the trade deadline than normal. So I think that we'll see teams that are, maybe they have cap space, but they're even like making moves, going with less than 23 players on the roster to build up even more cap space early in the year. And I think we'll see teams, towards the trade deadline, they could basically take as much cap hit as you could possibly give them because they'll have accrued all this space. And so whether that means they're trying to get players that they want, or they're going to just get in the mix and help a 3-way trade or something to retain some salary. We saw with Leonard being traded from Chicago to Vegas, he went through Toronto where they retained a bit. We could see these teams that have accrued cap space doing things like that, which you could see in a normal year, but because each of these days are worth so much more, it just compounds the ability to build up space and be able to take on cap hit later in the year.
And a team like Chicago, they could, be used as a thoroughfare for another team, and they could get a draft pick or something like that out of it. That's a way that they could, move their rebuild, or try to work on their rebuild by accruing, cap space, or not cap space, draft picks.
Exactly right. Yeah,
Being third party.
Yeah, exactly right. Like it's almost like a waste to finish the year with a whole bunch of cap space, because if you get to the trade deadline, you have less than a month's worth of the player's salary to actually pay, assuming they haven't even, if they've had signing bonuses earlier in the year. It could be very little cash for a team to actually pay if they take a player or part of their salary. But they could utilize all that cap space and get some assets for it. So yeah, it's kind of a waste if teams aren't utilizing some of their cap space later in the year.
Yeah, that's interesting. Ray, you got anything to add to that?
Well, Hart, what's one team early on here, not to put you on the spot, but one team early on here that you can maybe see, man, they're going to have to make some moves. They're going to do some shenanigans with the taxi squad, and, before we start here.
Interesting. Well, I don't know about shenanigans, but like a team like Montreal, for example, as far as I've seen, they don't have anyone injured. And if you took their best, like 23 players, they'd be over the cap. So they're going to need, from what it looks like, unless they make some moves, they can probably only go with 21 players on the roster. And that means there's a couple decent players that are going to have to go through waivers and be available. So that's one team. Even like Vegas, Winnipeg, Toronto, again, they're all really close to the cap. It doesn't sound like they have anyone necessarily injured. And so again, they're going to have to drop some players and go, with maybe 21 players on the roster in order to make it work. A team like Edmonton, I think, is interesting because that LTIR example that I mentioned, they're kind of stuck in the middle right now. So with their most likely 23 player roster, I have them projected at $2.2 million over the cap. But Oscar Klefbom, who's going to miss the year, he's got a $4.167 million cap hit. So if they just submitted this roster on opening day, then their pool is only going to be 2.2 million, and that's all they can exceed the cap all year. So that's like kind of a complete waste. So they either need to get just under the cap for opening day and submit that roster. So they either need to clear 2.2 million, or they need to add, just over 1.8 million or so, 1.9 million to get closer to his full cap hit so that they can actually get that benefit for the year. So we're going to see some moves with the Oilers. I think, it really depends if they have some injuries or not. If they get 2 guys injured, then that's easy. They can kind of have 26 players with Klefbom and get to 4 million over. But if not, maybe they do something like claim a guy on waivers who's then quarantining to do what I talked about earlier. Or we might see a guys like James Neal or Chason or someone, or Yamamoto, who doesn't need waivers, but but might not be on the opening day roster, just to get under the cap and submit that paperwork before calling them up the next day. So those are some teams to watch. And then the final one I would just say is Washington. They're going to have, with Kempny and Lundqvist, they're going to be $4 million. They can be $4 million over the cap. That's the max LTIR pool. And I find it really interesting when they signed Chara for 795,000, a really specific number. And I looked at my projected roster, and with him on it and everything, 23-man roster, that puts them like $3,000 under, less than being 4 million over the cap. So I think that's a tip off of like, okay, I think this is the roster that they're going with. It's pretty clear why they gave him 795 and not 800.
Yeah. Sure. It's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things that, even just a, everyday fan doesn't even think about when it comes to the cap side of things, being a general manager and having a capologist, that's for sure.
Yeah. The one thing I saw was like, maybe players would get, paper, a lot of paper transactions to get guys, off the roster for a day, which would accrue some extra money on the days off and things like that. Like if you're a young player that's, waiver exempt, you could, if you make whatever it is, $3 million and you go down for a day, that could be significant for your team, a team that's, really close to the cap. So that would be an interesting thing. And the other thing that I was thinking about too is at first I thought Toronto was going to be, really in trouble, but they seem to pare things down a lot. But if you look at Tampa Bay right now, they're listed at 16.51666 million under the cap or over the cap.
Over the cap.
Yeah, over the cap. And but they've got Kucherov's, going to miss the almost the entire season. He makes like what, $9-10 million or something like that. So that accounts for some of that right there. But it's kind of interesting, what they have going on there, because they had to shed some pretty decent players to, even get to where they're at right now.
Yeah, well, so with Tampa, they have Kucherov 9.5 million, and then they traded for Gaborik and Nielsen. So with those guys all in LTIR, they can be over the cap by 16.975 million. And if you look at what I'm showing as their projected roster, it's 16.5 million. So they're pretty much set. Like they could potentially be added a couple $100,000 more of cap it, which is kind of a hard number to just add. So they're cap compliant and pretty much set, even though they're almost at like $100 million cap hit team. So yeah, it's interesting to see how that works out.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that's all some pretty interesting stuff. Now there's a lot of things that are going to happen this season, both with Seattle, even though they don't have a team, but there's going to be a lot of implications. The things that, go on this season that are going to, lead up to the expansion draft, free agency, possible trades, and things like that. So as far as you're concerned, or at least what you're seeing, you can't see into the future too much, but some things that, may have come to mind. How will the expansion draft affect what happens at the trade deadline, which is going to come a lot sooner than it's going to be there? Like basically, it's going to feel like the season just started and then the trade deadline is going to be here. So,
yeah, well, I think, we're already seeing moves that are sort of with an eye towards expansion. Like we just saw Anaheim sign Anthony Stolarz to an extension, a backup goalie, or probably their third string goalie, but that's to meet the goalie exposure requirements. The Oilers signed Chris Russell to an extension in I was going to say summer, but the off season. Again, I think that's to meet their defenseman exposure requirements. So I think we'll see some contract extensions that, oh, that's weird. Why are they signing this guy to an extension now? When it would normally be like an off-season thing, but that's to satisfy the minimum exposure requirements. And then, yeah, I do think we'll see some trades. We've heard a lot about what lessons did they learn from what happened with Vegas. And to me, one of the biggest lessons would be, instead of trying to pay Seattle to not take players, why don't you just trade some players that that you're potentially going to lose to teams that can protect them and get an asset from them, right? Or maybe you have to make a trade with someone else and to get rid of a bad contract. But if you're working with like 30 other teams, or 29, 30 other teams, to either get something for players that you can't protect, or move some bad contracts away to kind of help with your protection, you have a lot better market than before. Everyone basically only did a deal with Vegas. They controlled the entire market. So now I definitely think we'll see moves leading up to the trade deadline, at the deadline, with an eye towards like who might be exposed or who can't be protected, and trying to sort of shuffle those pieces around the board for all the other teams, so that there's just not as much available potentially for Seattle, and that teams aren't just counting on trying to work something out with them.
Right. Right. Yeah. And I just want to shout out to Sergeant Pickles on Twitter. He actually sent that question or part of that question in. And he had a follow up that we'll kind of get on that as well. But thanks for sending in the question, Sergeant Pickles. Sergeant Pickles 13 on Twitter. So, Ray, is there anything as far as you have seen, like, or have been, considering as far as the, expansion draft and the trade deadline?
Nothing that I've seen. I think it's going to be interesting to see how teams do get to the trade deadline, and a team that could be out of it starts to make some moves, looking towards the expansion draft. I mean, Hart already talked about, Chris Russell and stuff like that. And, looking at, obviously just homegrown here in Chicago, you start thinking, okay, who can be there? And you're out of the playoffs or another team that's going to be fighting for the first pick overall and trying to get some guys there and trying to rebuild your team back up, maybe with some draft picks. And it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely fun to have a team like Seattle coming in because it does add a little bit more fun to the off season, a little bit more to think about, as a fan of a different team as well. But, we'll see at the trade deadline what some of these bottom feeders will be doing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I think something sort of a developing thing to watch this year. So the expansion rules originally were that if a player missed the last 60 games or had a potentially career-ending injury, they don't meet the minimum exposure requirements, so they wouldn't count as one of like the D forward or goalies that a team has to have available. But the league could also deem them ineligible to be claimed in the expansion draft. Well, that 60 games is prorated to 41 games, which that's not that many games. So if you have players that are going to miss this year or miss the season, or they get injured in the first week or two, which, considering some of these guys have played either no games or like 5 games in almost a year, I think we will see a lot of injuries. That'll be really interesting to see, like, if there's some big injuries, how will that impact expansion? Will they not be that might mean they won't meet the exposure requirements, which isn't a huge deal, but would the league potentially make those players exempt from being picked? So back to our example, like Oscar Klefbom, he's a pretty good defenseman, assuming that he's comes back to even a pretty high percentage of his former self. That might be a player that, if he was exposed, Seattle would potentially be interested in. But if he misses the season, could the league say actually he's not eligible to be claimed, and then the Oilers both wouldn't lose him and also don't have to waste a spot protecting him? So that kind of a situation, I think, would be something interesting to watch, like how the injuries play out and who misses like the last 41 games of the year.
Yeah, that would be interesting for sure. The second part of Sergeant Pickles' question was kind of, and I'm going to combine two together, but they kind of are related, was on a follow-up, does Seattle take on some big money players year one? Now, to add to that, I was kind of interested in, do they take on, the big, like the biggest example is Brent Seabrook, but, because there's two ends of the spectrum on this. You have big contracts that are kind of albatrosses and are handcuffing, organizations, but you also have, could you go out and I haven't looked at the free agent market, so I don't know what it is next summer, but if there's a big name on that free agent market, like say it was at Alex Pietrangelo, would they go out and spend big money on a guy like that? So it's kind of a two-part question, but they're kind of related. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind, like in the expansion draft, Seattle has to pick cap people with existing contracts with a cap at up to 60 or of a minimum 60% of the cap, which is like 49 million. So, if you think about 49 million over 20 players, that's an average of $2.45 million a contract. So are they going to pick a whole bunch of like kind of mid-range $2, $3, $4 million guys? Or, if someone will incentivize them enough, would they take a big contract or two? I think there's no chance that they would take a big contract that has many, many years left, but potentially to take a big contract with 1 or maybe 2 years left, if they can get an asset to take that contract on. Back to Vegas, I think they took Grabovski, and there's some other, they took Clarkson. So there were some contracts that they were incentivized to take, and I think that might be a better route, like for Seattle to take a couple, maybe take a couple big bad contracts, and then they can take more like cheaper players throughout the rest of the roster. I mean, it gives them some more flexibility. So, but again, I don't think there's any way they take a bad contract that's got many, many years left. It's just not going to be worth it for them.
Ray, you got anything?
No, I was hoping he was going to say they were going to take Seabrook and everything was going to be great, but
I know it's so painful for me to have to like.
I was also going to tell him to put the bottle down if he said that.
It's painful for me to talk about Brent Seabrook like that because he's my favorite player on the Blackhawks. He was for a long time. I mean, he was such a great player for a long time, but he just declined so fast. And there's so many years left on this contract. It was a bad contract the day they signed it. And it's just getting even worse. I saw some other articles where they were saying, like his wasn't the worst contract in the league, but it's really close to the worst contract in the
Pretty
league.
bad.
Yeah. They can't buy him out. They can't do anything. They have
so with 3 years left on that deal after this year, I don't see what Chicago could possibly give that would make Seattle want to take that on.
They don't have anything. That's the other thing. They're trying to rebuild. They can't be giving things away unless you're giving up a Patrick Kane, which of course you're not going to give up Patrick Kane to get rid of Brent Seabrook at this point in time. And they couldn't probably take on that salary either because that's $20 million worth of players right there, pretty almost just with two players. So that's a crazy thing, but they don't have they're not going to trade Kirby Doc. They're not going to trade Adam Boqvist. And then their prospect pool after those, after the big name guys drops significantly after that. So they would have to package 3-4 players at least. And they have to be pretty decent players on top of that. So,
I think the answer with Seabrook is he's going to finish that contract on injured reserve or long-term injured reserve. I mean, I think that's the answer.
Yeah, it kind of was it all kind of fell into place when he had surgery last year. And then he announced that he was almost ready to come back for the bubble, which everyone kind of put their head in their hands. Like they were kind of hoping he was going to be like, oh, that's it. I can't go anymore. But now he hasn't been to camp. So, and they're not disclosing injuries at this point in time. They're kind of doing the unfit thing again. Same thing's happening with Corey Crawford in New Jersey as well. So, but anyway, yeah, fans have been hoping for that. I was on the, there's going to be a compliance buyout next, CBA before they sign this one. I thought maybe they would get some compliance buyouts in there. And the Blackhawks were intending on using a compliance buyout on that contract, but it didn't happen. So now they're here. They're stuck with it.
I just never thought that was going to happen. Like, why would the owners? A compliance buyout is money that goes to the players that doesn't count against the salary cap, or right? Like that doesn't count against the player's share. Like, why would the owners go for that?
Yeah, yeah.
Especially in this environment, I just didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, that's definite. Yeah.
And Hart, what's the biggest thing, the difference in this expansion draft versus what Vegas went through? Is it going to be exactly the same rules and stuff like that, or what's the biggest difference between now and then? And only being a couple years.
It's all the same rules. Difference might be maybe some teams learned a lesson or two from before. Okay. And it's interesting, like Vegas isn't participating, so they can kind of get involved and like potentially facilitate things or get in on the action and disrupt things, which we obviously didn't have before as well. So, but aside from that, it's all the same. But with the flat cap, I think, like Vegas was willing to take on some bad contracts for a year or two, knowing that the cap was going up, and they didn't expect to be this like so good so fast when they were making their initial picks. Mm-hmm. I think Seattle, knowing like this cap is not moving for 4 or 5, maybe 6 years. So again, I think they're going to be a little tighter with what kind of cap hits they take on, knowing that it's not like their issues will just go away in a year or two by virtue of the cap going up.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm glad you kind of brought that up, the cap, the cap not going up for the next couple of years, because there's something that I was going on and about on Twitter, and there's two parts to it, of course. There's the naming of the divisions with sponsors, and there's the putting small stickers on the helmets for sponsors. Now, I fancy myself as pretty conservative, or not non-conservative. Sorry. So I'm okay with all of it. I don't care. The league's growing. I mean, I grew up with the league in the 80s, and the league is definitely not what it was in the 80s. The league grows and grows and grows and changes. A lot of things have changed in the league. So a little sticker on a helmet, if it's going to bring in revenue, and they're not getting revenue now, which means maybe the cap can go up sooner than originally anticipated. Hopefully, any little bit can help at this point in time. So it doesn't kill me, because I don't care whether it says Chicago on the side of the helmet, or if it says Portillo's or first third or fifth third or something like that on the side of the helmet. Like, I don't care. The helmets have logos on them for the helmets. I mean, CCM, they have that stuff too. So it's like, what's one more little thing on the helmet? The naming of the divisions, I don't think it's going to stay. I don't think it's going to stay like that. I think they'll find other places to do it, but for right now, I think they just did it for this year to try to bring in some more revenue for the league. So hopefully they can not lose as much money as they had originally anticipated. And no one uses it. No one's going to use those names. Just like when you talk about the Winter Classic, unless you're writing for a newspaper or a website, you don't say the Bridgestone Winter Classic. You just say, are you going to watch the Winter Classic? Are you going to go to the Winter Classic? People leave all that stuff out. So it's like, everyone's getting all up in arms about this, that there's a sponsor on each of the divisions. And it's, I think it's a little bit of like fake outrage. It's not changing anything. I had one guy the other day telling me it changes the fabric of the game because they're
not even real divisions. They just made these up because of COVID. Like,
that's exactly what I said.
The same next year.
Yeah.
All those Montreal Forum. Am I wrong?
All those things you're mentioning, though, like, yeah, they generate some money, but it's all, to me, like, insignificant compared to the biggest factor of where the cap goes, where the revenue for the league goes, is the new US TV deal. Like, we're talking billions of dollars versus like a few, some millions, which obviously in the real world, millions of dollars are important, but just when you look at like how it impacts your favorite team and what the salary cap is going to be, and the players escrow and all this stuff, this is like chipping away at it a little bit. But the biggest thing will be, do they get good ratings this year, and are they able to negotiate like a big, huge US TV deal or not? And if they don't negotiate a big, huge US TV deal, the salary cap is not moving for many, many years. And this basically pot of money that the players or the owners are not going to be able to work their way out of it within the next 5 or 6 years. It's going to potentially even take longer. So to me, again, it's good. They need to figure out how to generate some revenue, but it's all like irrelevant compared to the US TV deal.
Yeah. And then you get the people who are freaking out. It's going to look like they're in Europe. And I'm like, listen, the league can be dumb sometimes, but there are some things that they don't want to touch. And, the uniform is the way they are. They're not going to want to change them much. Maybe one little patch on his shoulder, and that would probably be it. And I don't even know if that's going to happen, but I think it'll happen maybe at some point, some point in time. But they're not going to do anything to drastically change the uniforms or anything like that. It's just relax. There's ads on the boards. There's ads on the ice. There's ads all over you walk into the United Center and there's, all kinds of ads running on the scoreboard constantly until the game starts and while the game's going on too. So there's ads everywhere. A sticker on helmet doesn't hurt anything. Throwing a sponsor on a division name, it doesn't do anything. Just find something real to be mad about. This is the way I look at it.
There's plenty in the world to be mad about right now.
Obviously. Yeah, sure. Right.
After 14 games, that they won't even realize it. It's just going to be like the sticker of the team. You won't even know it's there. And, it's like anything else. When you put up the, on TV, you put it over the boards and stuff like that. And it's just, next period is sponsored by them. I mean, there's so much marketing and so much advertisement, so much money that goes on, by 14 games in, the people complaining won't even realize it.
Yeah, I'll go one better than you. I'll say 5 games in. They won't.
Yeah.
I think after it's kind of like,
I already don't care.
Yeah, right, exactly. With no games in. It was kind of like the way I felt about the bubble was I didn't miss the fans that much. Like once I was watching the game for 5 minutes, like unless they showed the crowd or they, the the puck went into the crowd, so the camera had to go that way or where the crowd would be. I really didn't notice it a whole lot. I was fine with all of it. It didn't bother me. I mean, there's other things that I've watched, like I've seen like wrestling and stuff, and them not having fans there seems weird to me. And baseball seemed a little weird. Football seemed a little weird for me. Hockey really didn't, and neither did basketball.
I actually found like the fake crowd noise annoying and like distracting. And sometimes you could barely hear the announcers because the fake crowd noise was so loud. Like I would have liked to see, you could hear it better in basketball. Like in hockey, I would have liked to hear just less of that so you could actually hear what was happening on the ice, like hear the guys calling and, they can bleep the swear words or whatever. But I would have liked to hear more of the on ice sound instead of like that fake crowd noise, which it seemed to me like I was playing, NHL on PlayStation and I had turned the crowd noise up too loud and it was like driving me nuts.
Yeah, I could see that for sure. I mean, they went a little too far with that. Like just you could put like a crowd murmur, a low crowd murmur, just so it's not like dead air, and that's fine. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. But I don't mind being a hockey player myself. I don't mind hearing the on ice stuff. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't like some of the things I might hear might make me laugh, but none of it's going to offend me. And I like hearing that kind of stuff. I like hearing people yelling for passes. I like I like hearing all that stuff because again, I'm a very talkative player. I'm a goalie, but I'm a very talkative player on the ice. So I'm always yapping at people, and people are always talking back to me. So I'm used to that kind of game. That's my kind of thing.
And you can still make it off in the distance where you may not pick up everything that you wouldn't want on national television, just like you do in other sports. But for me, it was just enough that, I couldn't hear the buzzing of the lights, above the announcers. I don't need it to be loud to watch a hockey game. I would, like you guys said, I'd rather hear the referees talking. I'd rather hear the action on the ice. I'd rather hear the boards. I'd rather hear, just the action on the ice overall versus that fake noise is definitely crazy.
I'm glad you bring that up. I like hearing the refs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I like when they come up and they're saying stuff. Guys do this.
Let them go.
Yeah.
So much stuff that you don't even realize. They're such a big part of the game. I'm always amazed on more of them don't just get absolutely drilled. I know they do, but just they're always at the right place at the right time, knowing where to be. But it would be interesting to hear a little bit more of the action between the guys, knowing that, hey, the ref's mic'd up, the guys know that before games and stuff like that, and get a little bit more feel for that, because you still can then shut it off while your play-by-play guy is doing his thing and color commentators doing his thing. And, hey, when you've got some good interaction with the referees, that's a lot of times, that's a lot of the good stuff. That's for sure.
Yeah, I saw somewhere that also on top of all this, like they were hoping that because we didn't even talk about this, that apparently they're going to play a couple games in Lake Tahoe.
Yeah,
that's what they're trying to do this year, which would be really interesting because there's going to be no fans there. There's only going to be the staff that are there, and they could probably use anything that would have blocked the crowd from being able to see anything to use for cameras or whatever features they want to do out there. They could, hang drones. They could do all that kind of crazy stuff out there. That's another interesting thing that could be coming up too. So, well, there's a couple of things that I put on the agenda just to kind of wrap things up a little more on hopefully on the fun side. My thing was, could Marc-Andre Fleury end up in the expansion draft casualty once again? He went to Vegas. They welcomed him with open arms. He was their big name. They trotted him out on stage as the first pick and all that stuff. And things, went well for a year, a couple of years, 2 years. And then now Robin Leonard's taken over as, the goalie there, and he's kind of the backup. So he's going to still have another year left on his deal. And I'm sure Vegas would really like, with a full season where they don't need that extra goalie and, full regular season, the full length, as far as months and days go as well, they might like to get rid of him and shed that $7 million of salary. What do you think?
Well, like we talked about, would they take a big contract? And we said, well, if it only has a year or so left. So, that's a perfect example. And I think it'll ultimately come down to his performance, because they're not going to take that contract if he's, no longer even a 1B kind of option if he really takes a step back this year. But I mean, looking at his career numbers, like he still seems quite solid and good. So if he keeps up that level of performance, I think he'd be a perfect example. Again, I don't think Seattle's. Well, I guess Seattle, they can't claim him from Vegas because Vegas isn't part of the expansion draft. So Vegas would have to trade him to somebody who would then expose him or make a deal with Seattle to take him. So I think Seattle's going to need to get an asset to take him, but it would be interesting to see kind of the musical chairs if Vegas trades him somewhere as part of some deal for Seattle to claim him. But again, I mean, his only knock on him right now is his contract. Like it's not like sorry to bring up Seabrook again, but it's not like the on ice performance where you can't really play him. Like, Fleury is an above average NHL goalie right now, if not more than that. So I think again, it's going to depend on some creativity to get him to a team and then have him get incentivized to go to Seattle, but certainly it's plausible.
Well, he could also, I mean, not as a draft casualty, but a kind of peripherally, an expansion casualty. They could just trade him straight to Seattle
for sure. Yeah, that's simpler.
And take whatever asset that they're gonna send along with them, and so that's a possibility too. And my last part was, and I kind of talked about this with Brandon Seeley from the Kraken crew in the first episode. What do we think we're going to see in this expansion draft? Do we think we're going to see them go out and get a bunch of defensemen like Vegas did? They just went defense heavy, and they said, we're going to have all the defensemen here, and people that need defensemen are going to have to then come get them from us and give us assets, and we could use that, weaponize that kind of. And whatever we use, we'll still have pretty good defense. We won't give up a lot of goals, and it actually worked out really well for them. Do we think that's what's going to happen? They're going to go out and pick up the best defenseman they possibly can, or everybody's number 3 defenseman, or something like that? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think, the one thing with Vegas' strategy is I do think they were expecting to get more for those defensemen that they were trying to flip. Like I think they figured they would get all these defensemen and they could get some good assets for them. And in the end, they were getting like 3rd round picks and several years later and 5th and 6th round picks for them. So it's not that it didn't work, but I think, they would hope to get more assets for those defensemen. But I mean, if you just look at the kind of the protection list, like of how teams can protect, if they go the 7-3 method, an 8th forward is by definition like a 3rd line forward, but a 4th defenseman is a second pairing defenseman. Well, what's more valuable to you, like a number 4 defenseman or a number 8 forward? Obviously, I would think a number 8 or a number 4 defenseman has more value to a team in league wide. So if teams, we saw almost every team, there were just only a couple of exceptions, go with that 7-3 protection route. Protection route. So I think if we see it go that way, I just think, maybe it's not even Seattle's strategy to hoard defensemen, but it just is kind of like a natural byproduct of like, those are kind of those will be more of the better players available, just based on where they kind of fit into the roster. But I mean, everything would change if more teams just go the 8 overall protection route. And, because then I think you'd end up with more second line forwards available. So I think that's certainly something Seattle's looking at. But the coolest thing, I think, from being like, if you're on a Vegas or Seattle in this situation, is you just have to be so flexible, right? Like you don't really know what teams are going to do. You can do your research and stuff, and you can have your plans, but maybe you want to take a whole bunch of defensemen and see what you could do with them. But if most of the teams go with just the 8 overall player route, well, that plan is out the window, and you have to pivot and move to a new one. So I think, they'll probably have a whole bunch of different sort of plans, and based on what they see come available, they'll just kind of pick one of those off the shelf and go with it. But I do think it's quite likely that it'll be a defense heavy setup, just kind of by virtue of how it works.
Yeah. What are you expecting, Ray?
I think Hart hit the nail on the head that, you're going to end up with more second pairing defensemen than you probably are, second line forwards. And that just only makes sense that I'm going to take as many good defensemen as possible. And then if guys get injured or guys need to get traded around, I've got a good group. And for me, I mean, that's something that you can get 3 forwards. still got to, roll 9, roll 12, but, roll 9 that you feel comfortable with. And, if I get myself 3 defensemen and I only have to roll 4 and I got my bottom pairing can be whoever I want it to be, that's half my defense if I could find those 3 guys. So I think it's just a little bit easier that way when you're building that franchise from the ground up is to get those defensemen that can play meaningful minutes.
And to go back to Chicago, will Seattle have a better defense than Chicago next year? It could be.
Yes.
Yeah, very likely. Yeah. Yeah. They might have a Calvin DeHaan or something like that on Seattle. So, yeah. Well, I think that pretty much wraps most of it up. We've gone on for about an hour here. So, Hart, I want to thank you for coming on. That's puckpedia.com, at Puckpedia on Twitter. You don't have any other social media, do you?
Well, just actually launched a podcast called the Show Me the Money Hockey Podcast. So yeah, check that out. Just recorded an episode actually with Brian Burke, and went through sort of how he handled some negotiations and try to get into some topics that you maybe don't hear him discuss other places. More along the lines of things that I'm interested in about contracts and negotiations and things like that. So yeah, check that out. But yeah, please make sure you follow on Twitter at Puckpedia.
Cool. Yeah, actually, I have some family connections with Brian Burke, so
cool.
I found that very interesting. So he's awesome. I love Brian Burke. I can't say enough great things about him. I like that he's grumpy, but he's smart. He's funny in a grumpy way, which is so hilarious. I love the guy. I think he's hilarious.
Yeah, he was great. I think people will really enjoy the interview. It should be out right away.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, we'll have to go over there and check that out. Ray, anything else you want to talk about? Anything you're working on now?
No, I'm working on some stuff with the Steel and some scouting that I'll get up on the rink.com here real soon, and check out all our stuff at FC Hockey. Got an awesome team there now doing a lot of scouting. But nope, just got some Steel stuff coming up. They're unbelievable. They've got some guys that they're going to be signing, I believe, here. And because they've got some spots left for overseas guys, and the USHL is getting really loaded. If you like junior hockey, USHL is going to be even more loaded. I think over the next couple of weeks with some guys that are going to be signing from other places. But Steel are in first place. Make sure you got keep reading it at rink.com.
Yeah, the-rink.com. Yeah, I think you can. I think I put together steel.the-rink.com. We'll take you to all the Steel articles. So, but you can also look at all that stuff just at the Rink Official on Twitter as well. So that's all I really have right now. I do want to remind people, manscaped.com. Use the Rink Seattle as that discount code for 20% off. Also, puckhockey.com. PUCKHCKY.com. There are original sponsors, longtime sponsors. We love them. I bought a bunch of Christmas presents for people from puckhockey.com this year. I got my wife this really nice hoodie, Gojira hoodie. I bought some stuff for myself. We're not getting this stuff for free, guys. Listen, I go there and I buy it. I use the discount code just like everybody else does. So, head over there, puckhockey.com, and get yourself some stuff. They just released a Metallica line, which is awesome. I mean, they've got all the thrash metal bands. So if you're a metalhead or anything like that, they even have the Snoop Dogg stuff over there too. So maybe you like Snoop Dogg. They got the Snoop Dogg jerseys and stuff like that. So head over there, puckhockey.com, PUCKHCKY.com. You can find all of our comprehensive content at www.the-rink.com. We have all the popular social medias. At the Rink Official is where everything comes together. But you could follow the Seattle Kraken side. Kraken Hostel is for the podcast. I have the Rink Seattle, where all of our Seattle stuff is going to be sent out through. And I am at Puck and Hostel. If you get a chance on the iTunes rate and review, please go over there. Even if you don't do a review, please rate. I saw about 4 or 5 ratings and reviews. So I appreciate that, but any little bit helps, moves us up the scale, so more people see the podcast and stuff. So This is going to go in an audio version on YouTube as well, so you can check that out if you like it that way. We put it in a playlist over there. But any last things, Hart? You good? We good?
Looking forward to the season starting. Yeah, almost there.
Yeah, almost there. A week away. Ray, any last things?
Nope, let's get hockey started. I need it.
Let's get Ray some liquor and do this. Ray, what do you need? Another 40?
2, Jimmy.
Good man. You ready, Ray? Drunk enough?
I'm feeling no pain, Jimmy.
All right. I guess with all that said, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedules to download, listen, and support us. Until next episode, see you on the rink.